So welcome everyone to our Women in STEM career panel. My name is Vicki Herdina, and we're really excited to bring this first in our series of virtual career panels from Career Connect Southwest, a program of ESD 112. We have an amazing panel lined up today, and our goal is that hopefully you learn something about a career that you didn't know anything about before this broadcast. So thank you to all of our middle and high school students that submitted questions for our panelists, and we're excited to get started. So I want to introduce our moderator for the day, Sue Bluestein, who is our math specialist at ESD 112 and has a long history of working with girls and women in STEM subjects. So take it away, Sue.
All right, thanks, Vicki. So I'd like to start by taking a few minutes and having each one of our panelists today introduce themselves, their name, their specialty, their job title, the company they work for, and just a little bit about themselves so we can get to know them better. So what I'm going to do is start with Ananya, and then we'll go to Deborah, Kim, Masa, and Gina. So we can start with you, Ananya.
Hello, I'm Ananya. I am a molecular engineering student at the University of Chicago. I also do research in the Pritzker School of Molecular Engineering in one of the labs. I actually work with one of our other panelists, Kim. She's my mentor. And molecular engineering, it's a really new field, but it's like very interdisciplinary with different areas from STEM. And we work to solve like big problems, but at a very small scale. So that's why it's called molecular engineering. And also I love promoting involvement of women in STEM. I'm really involved in Society for Women in Engineering at my university. So we do a lot of encouragement for women and girls to get involved in STEM. So it's great that you all are here. And besides STEM, I really like to do other things as well, such as running. I like to hula hoop. I also like music a lot. So that's just a bit about me.
Thank you very much. Deborah, how about you?
So my name is Deb Morozic, and like Ananya, I have a focus on solving complicated or big problems, but unlike her, my focus is on big problems. I have both a bachelor's and a master's in human-centered systems engineering, which is really thinking about how do you engineer very large, complex systems where the humans are an integral portion. Originally, it was started back in the 50s when we had things like spaceships and weaponry that were so complicated that if we didn't take into account the human and the human's capabilities correctly, people would die, to the world today where we also think about how do we make it usable, useful, fun, exciting, relevant, whether it's products or experiences. I've been doing this for about 35 years, and right now I am the co-founder of a consultancy focused on this. And I've done a wide range of things, from redesigning control rooms in nuclear power plants to helping HP define what it would take to bring printers into the home back in the 90s, to recently working with companies that manufacture personal protective equipment and figuring out how to integrate sensors. What would it take to integrate sensors into this equipment so that we can better keep high-risk workers safe? So quite a wide variety of things.
Anything that you enjoy personally on your own time?
Walking, hiking, and cooking. I'm kind of known as the local go-to, and if anybody has any cooking questions amongst my friends.
Thank you. Kim. We can't hear you, sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
Does it work now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Kim. I am a postdoctoral researcher in molecular engineering, working with Ananya, as she just told you. And soon I'll be a professor of materials science and engineering at Clemson University. And right now I'm I'm really excited about, I'm an experimentalist that studies things at all sorts of at the interface of all sorts of fields. And so I've always been fascinated by how things work. And right now, I'm particularly fascinated by biological materials, which behave completely differently than the kinds of materials that we know how to build out of normally. And I started as a physicist, but I've studied many different things, and now I work in at the interface of physics and biology and engineering, where I'm always excited to explore new kinds of science. And in my own time, or when I'm not in the lab, which some people think I never leave the lab, but when I'm not in the lab, I really enjoy art and languages. And so I studied maybe 5 different languages besides English, and I love photography and painting and woodworking.
Thank you. Masa, how about you?
All right. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Masa. I'm a civil engineer with so many years of experience. Part of my work experience is working in different countries. I work for Mac Esposito, is a local firm in Vancouver. My role is transportation for my firm. My team and I, we design roadways, highways, utilities, which brings power, brings internet to your home, gas and water, and other needs. I'm originally from Iran. I have my bachelor degree in civil engineering from back home. My husband and I, we moved to Canada, and then after that to USA about 16 years ago. I also have my master's degree in civil engineering from Portland State University. I enjoy my job and working with people. I feel we make difference in people's life, and that's the main thing I like about my job. Outside of work, I enjoy spending time with my 2 daughters. I like take them to outdoor activities. I like camping. I also love music, dancing, and cooking, like Deborah. I'm excited, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And then we have Kim. Or no, I'm sorry, Gina.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gina, and currently I work as an outdoor educator. I went to school and I studied science. I studied geology and biology and interactions between the two. And I've always enjoyed the field of geology because it involves lots of outdoor teaching. And so I've made a career of learning how to teach outdoors. I currently work for a nonprofit organization at Mount St. Helens, and we teach about the science and stories of Mount St. Helens through field trips, online learning. I'm doing a lot of videos about volcanoes right now during our COVID-19 time. But it allows me to teach in a different way than in the classroom. So field-based teaching, being surrounded by the birds, the rocks, and the plants is really what I love, and I feel like it's one of my strengths to teach outdoors. On my personal time, I love the snow. I love getting out in the winter time. I have cross-country skis, and even when it snows in Portland, which is rare, I like to hop on my skis before the snowplows get out and cruise all the different city streets.
Thank you all for sharing. We really appreciate you being here today. So let's get started with the first question. And this question I'm going to open up to any of you who wants to speak first. And it is, and I'll give you a moment to think, how would you describe a typical work day or work week for you on your job?
I can go
Okay, thank you.
first. um, so there's lots of flexibility in my firm with the hours, but we would like to, as a team, work together. So we try to be at work between 9 to 4, but of course there are lots of flexibility. So in terms of work hours, 5 days working, 8 to 5 is the normal. The nature of our work is team working, so it's about 3 to maybe 7, 8 team member that constantly we need to interact with each other.
Thank you. All right, Deborah. Wait, we don't have sound.
Thank you. I would say I go very differently because my company is virtual. My other co-founder is in Austin, Texas, and we have people on our team from Chicago, Bay Area, and Long Beach, California as well. And our clients, frankly, are all over the world. And so almost everything we do is virtually. Occasionally, we will visit a client site or go to a location to teach a workshop at a conference. But most of what we do is through Google Suite, Zoom, Google Meet, chats, phone, text. And so our days are very fluid because it's a lot of what we do is asynchronous. In other words, not always at the same time, although we do have a high value in working as a team, but we use a lot of collaboration tools to do so, as well as a lot of technology.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Gina.
My workday is pretty different. I work sometimes in an office, but I also work a lot in the field. Currently, with my current job, I lead many field trips that occur at Mount St. Helens. Some of these field trips are for elementary school classrooms. Some of these field trips are for colleges that are coming to learn about Mount St. Helens and the volcano, the eruption. And so my workday can really vary. It's very seasonally dependent. So during the spring and fall, when we have our school programs, sometimes I go into classrooms to give programs to schools, and sometimes we have buses that come for day trips or schools that come for overnight trips. In the summer, we do more longer field trips where maybe we have programs for high school students that are 5 days long. So I get to do a lot more camping with folks in the summertime. During the fall, we go back to a school season of field trips. And then in the winter, I spend my time preparing for the entire year. So that's a lot of organizing our supplies, figuring out what our trips are going to look like, designing the curriculum and the way that we're teaching, and coordinating with all of the people involved to make field-based learning possible. That's a little snapshot of the day. Sometimes it involves outdoor cooking, sometimes it involves outdoor games, sometimes it's raining really hard and all we want to do is take shelter under the trees to be dry.
Thank you. Kim, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, my day is kind of different from all of these, but a lot shares a lot of things in the same with some of the first things, like a lot of my day is collaborating. And so I'm a researcher right now. I'm a researcher in a lab, so I spend most of my day in the lab, but a lot of the best ideas come from talking to people in the hallway or going to talks and meeting with people. And so I spend a lot of time talking with colleagues both at my university and all over the world through the internet. Right now, we're very virtual, like Deb, which I think probably most of the world is very virtual right now. And it's a very different style of work for me than normal because I'm used to running into people all the time. And I'm also used to a lot of my workday being involved with helping other people learn about how to do research and and learning together how to explore the kinds of science that we're learning. But most of my work is a large part of my work is also just at the bench in the lab where I get to use my hands and build new equipment and design new experiments and analyze data using computers and things like that.
Thank you. Ananya, did you have anything you wanted to add?
So like my day is kind of different. A little bit like Kim's because sometimes I do research, but I'm also a student. So it's like a balance of both. In the summers, I do research full time. So during that, it's a very unique experience because you do get to work on research, whether so what I was doing last summer, it was experimental research. So I got to learn from my mentors and also talk to other people who are my seniors and learn about their research and what they're doing, which is interesting because it gives you new ideas, maybe something that you might want to do in the future. And also, I also got the opportunity to go to talks as well. During the year, it's a bit different because I do have to do my classes as well. But my classes and the research lab that I'm in, they're very interrelated because they're in the same department. So a lot of the classes and whatever I'm learning from those classes, as I learn more and more, I'm like, oh, this is the kind of thing, this is why I was doing this certain thing in my research. And yeah, so that's like, it's a different dynamic, but it's super fun to be involved in research as a student, especially if you're planning on doing that later on as well. It's a really nice experience.
Thank you. I see a common theme between all of you. There's a lot of teamwork, a lot of communication that goes on, whether it's virtual or in person. I was thinking about the different types of engineering and STEM professions that you have, and I was thinking, can you think of a project that you worked on that you could describe to students? And I was thinking, for one to start with Deborah, the Human Factors Manager sounds like such an interesting title. And it said in your biography about making a family-friendly computer or a printer so you could have it at home. I'm just curious about.
Well, this was work that we did, or I led back in probably early 90s when, if you think back then, some of you may not have been born back then, but back then, pretty much printers were in offices, or if they were anyplace else, they were on long sheets of paper and they were dot matrix and they went and they were very loud and very expensive and not very easy to read. And HP was one of the top producers of both laser jets and inkjets. And at the time, HP had first come out with a printer that was less than $1,000 for an inkjet printer, and everybody was like, "Wow, that's amazing price point." And at that point, the lab manager came to me and said, "Can you figure out what it would take for people to want to bring a printer into their home?" And so I designed research, and we went and visited families all over the world. It was called ethnographic research or field research, where we would spend a day in the life of a family. We typically would show up at 2 or 3 in the afternoon whenever the students got off of school and stay with them throughout the evening and just spend time with them, live with them, learn with them, explore how technology is used in their home and what they would imagine a printer, what it would take for a printer to be something that they wanted in their home. And then we collected up all this information that we learned from people all over the world, and then munched it all together and came up with some ideas and definitions and concepts of what it would take for people to really be interested in starting to bring computers and printers into their homes. And that was, a lot of that work was foundational to the direction that HP went with their lower price printers.
Thank you. Masa, I was looking at yours as an engineer for McKay Spacito. And you said you work on managing roadways and utility projects. So can you mention or describe one that you've worked on?
Sure. Well, I love all my projects, but because I feel it brings value to all of our life. But I think my favorite project are park improvement projects, because I can see happy faces, the kids with family. They walk into the new park area and they enjoy the facility. The one I'm very excited and we're currently working on it is the Harmony Sport Complex. It's in Vancouver. We are currently working with Clark County to improve the existing facility, bring more soccer fields, improve the existing baseball court, of course improve the parking, because there's not enough parking for all the visitors when it comes to tournament. It's a backup, traffic is backup. So our job as an engineer is to improve the traffic when it comes to tournament and people need for parking, and work with project owners and county to add more facility into the existing one. I'm very excited for that project to come.
Thank you. Then we have Kimberly and Ananya. You both work, we have, I see molecular engineering and material science. I'm curious about the material science. Either one of you want to talk about a project with either one of those?
So I mean, Ananya is free to talk, but maybe I'll try. So I work with biological materials, and so like normally we think of when we build a building, we build it out of like steel and concrete. And when there's an earthquake or a tornado, we don't want it to change much, the structure. But biology builds things sometimes, like our bodies, our lungs, our cells are built such that they're always dynamic and always changing. They change their shape and they respond to their environment and they adapt. And so I study the like structure of a cell. So like instead of the wood and concrete and steel that you build, you know, the structure of a building or a bridge, the cell is made up of little fibers that are flexible. And I study this like a structural material. We study how it responds to forces and how it can exert forces on its environment. But I don't study it in a cell. I take like chicken, grind it up, and purify out just the component that makes this structural material. And then we purify different components and we add it to it and see how it changes the material property. And one thing that I've done, my kind of favorite project that I've worked on recently, is I've taken this material that normally behaves like a solid, like an elastic, like structural material, and I've turned it into a liquid. And then it has all sorts of crazy properties because it's not a regular liquid like water. It's a liquid made up of these fibers. And so these liquids exhibit really special properties, like they can organize themselves into different structures if they have multiple components, and they can change their shape by themselves. And so I like to study these adaptive and responsive materials that are derived from biology.
Gina, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't think for this question.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Ananya?
Yeah, I think like Kim got like most of it.
All right. So I know another question. Like, we've got middle school and high school girls watching this, and they might say, well, what did you want to be when you were in high school, and how did you get to where you are now? Okay, Deborah?
Had to unmute. So I went to high school in a time where girls in STEM were not as common as they are today. And I knew I wanted to get into engineering because it was applied science and I knew I liked people. So I liked that intersection. I was looking for something that was the intersection of people and engineering. I started at University of Illinois in biomedical engineering because I was told by some counselor that that's people and engineering is engineering things that go inside of people. One semester in, when I was in human anatomy and dissecting a human body, I thought, not for me. I don't really like the insides of people. So from there, I went and got involved, and I kind of pivoted a little bit on my career or my studies and went into biomechanics and worked with a professor on biomechanics. And I thought that was a little bit more interesting because it was around how do we understand and think about how bodies move and what the ranges of motion are in things, and whether it was in a lab or working with a custom prosthetist who made high performance prosthetics for people who were athletes or dancers. It was all around the biomechanics of it. And I thought, okay, this is kind of more interesting because it's like, how do you use engineering to help people? But even that wasn't quite right. And I stumbled upon something called human factors, which was how do you take into account people's social, emotional, mental, cognitive capabilities, their desires, their behaviors, and make sure that systems are designed to take that into account. And I thought, aha, that's it, that's me. But back then, as I said, most of it was applied to how do we keep people from dying? And so it was a matter of, do I want to work in airplanes or submarines or space stations or nuclear power plants? Because those were the places that were complex enough that if you didn't take a human into account, their biomechanics and their cognitive abilities, you didn't take that human into account, people died. So that was kind of my micro pivots along the way in my education.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, Gina?
So ever since I was young, I spent a lot of time outdoors, and I was curious about why things were the way that they were. So, for example, with my grandfather and my sisters, we used to go into the woods behind my house, and we would find the biggest rocks. We would call these rocks pride rocks. We'd climb on top, and usually my grandfather would bring along some ice cream. Be like, wow, we made it to the top of Pride Rock. These were boulders maybe the size of a car, and we'd get to celebrate with ice cream. Then I went to school for geology, and in the process of learning and discovering why I was so excited about geology as a field was because it answered questions that I had when I was younger. So why are there huge boulders in the middle of the woods in southern Rhode Island where I grew up? These boulders were plucked from mountains much further north, maybe as far north as Canada or even further north into many miles from the border, and carried by glaciers. And these glaciers deposited the big cobbles in my backyard. And as a kid, I was able to climb on these structures and get a sense for how big they were. And then when I learned about glaciers and the process of how material gets moved across continents on the surface, it really gave me context for, I could think in my head, wow, that boulder was so big. Granted, I was young when we used to go for the ice cream, so I was maybe a couple, 4 or 5 years old. So the boulders seemed especially large, and climbing them was a particular feat. But that's really stuck with me, the trying to puzzle and learn the whys of the world. And geology has given me many tools for looking at the landscape. As an educator, an outdoor educator, I teach about geology. I also teach about natural history. So why do we have certain trees growing where we do? Oftentimes it has to do with the rocks that are underground, or the angle of the slope, or the history of the area, whether there were glaciers or not. And all of these questions can start to be answered, or at least not answered, but puzzled over with some of the tools of the natural sciences. And so I've been, since a young age, I think I was interested in these questions, and then I found a discipline that served me. And now working as a teacher and an educator, I get to communicate and share the puzzling that I do. And it's very, very rewarding.
Thank you. Masa, you said you had something you wanted to share?
Sure. Got a similar experience where when we all were at high school. I guess that's started for me at the same time too. I remember I was enjoying solving mathematic problems. When it comes to choose between working on mathematic homeworks or biology, reading biology, I was going with mathematics. It was just easier for me. I like the logic. I like that 2 plus 2 is 4. It's not 4.2. It's not 3.8. It's 4. So I like the logic behind mathematics. But when I was serious, became serious to be engineer, it was when with my cousins, we were sitting and talking about who wants to do for their future, for our future. And most of them were boy cousins. They were talking about engineering path for them. And I told them, hey, I think I'm going to college for engineering college too. And one of them told me, you know, Masa, engineering is not for girls. I'm like, oh, then I want to be engineer. So I wanted to prove to him and to everyone that women can be engineer, not just engineer, good engineers. And that's how I became became serious to be an engineer.
Thank you. And Anya?
So I've always really, really liked math, and I used to like spend my free time solving puzzles. So I would buy like puzzle books, and they had like logic problems in it, and I would love doing that. So I would just solve it, and it was so much fun. And then in middle school, I went to a camp. I think I was around 5th grade. So one of the summers, I went to a camp, and it was about genetics. And it was so interesting. Like I was like, wow, this is so cool. And like a couple of years later, when we started learning about it in school, I was like, oh, like this is so cool. I can map Punnett squares. So I would draw Punnett squares. I would make pedigree charts for my family. Like I would be like, oh, this is why this certain person is this blood type. And then in high school, I got to take biology courses. It wasn't as fun as I expected it to be. And I was really struggling for some time. Once I started understanding it more, I was like, oh, this is cool. However, it's not as cool as genetics. And then I was like, oh, I think what I really like about genetics is that it has some math in it. I think that's what I really like. And then I started taking more of the harder physical sciences courses, so the chemistry and the physics. And I really, really like chemistry a lot. I was like, oh, like this kind of thing, I can sit down and I won't notice the time go by. I can just solve problems and I can just think about this. And I think what I just really liked was the statistical aspect of genetics and how biology can be applied to people. And then I was just like, oh, I can't decide which science or which part of math I really want to do. It's all so great. I can't decide. And when I applied for college, I forgot what I even applied for. And it turned out I had applied for molecular engineering, and I realized after I committed and after I visited, I was like, oh, this is what I applied for. And I was like, oh, this seems pretty cool. And then I realized, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to do. It's very interdisciplinary. It has a little bit of everything. And at a high level for engineering, just in general, you have to pull in skills from everywhere. So it was what I wanted at the end. So a bit different because I'm not a geneticist by any means, but I still use skills from all the sciences and various aspects of math.
Thank you. Deborah?
I keep losing the unmute button. I think one of the points that was made, and it's been made several times, is really key, which is almost everything today is interdisciplinary. Even if I'm a civil engineer or a human factors engineer, it really is, how do you bring the right physics, the right math, the right chemistry, the right material science, the right this, the right that, all together to solve problems.
Mm-hmm. You know what Matza said, reminded me of a question we did get from a student. It said, did any of you feel pressed to avoid feminine jobs such as nursing or teaching? Or it could also be the reverse, were any of you pressured to do normally a feminine job such as teaching or nursing?
I would say that I wasn't pressed to do that, but I did have to kind of get over the fact that when I walked into a class at the university, I was typically the token girl in the class. Maybe there would be two, but typically if there were any girls in the class, it would be one and it would be me. But eventually I got over that and got used to it, and it was not a big deal. And the more people interacted with how I did work and what I brought to the table, the fact that I was female became a non-issue.
Thank you. Martha, you said you had your hand up.
Just a memory I wanted to share. When we were just admitted, we were 8 out of 40 in our classroom, 8 girls out of 40. We admitted to the program. The very first month, or maybe second month, we were in the college. One of our faculty, this is really bad memory, but he asked us, all 8 of us, asked us to consider changing our major. He said, maybe as a girl, as a woman, you are not successful. This is very hard. This is for boys. It's always being at the field. So I'm glad none of us changed our major or listened to him to change our major. We all became very successful. Most of us, we got to higher education. We continued master degree, even at PhD level. There's a lot of opportunities in each major, and I am so glad none of us listened to him and got impressed by what he told us. We stayed positive and we stayed focused, and that was a story I wanted to share.
Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, Deb and Masha, I've had some experiences like that. Particularly like Deb, I was the only girl or female in my as a physics major out of 40 physics majors at my university. And at first that was kind of kind of weird. In high school, or middle school, I'd never been in a class where I was the only female. I never really let it bother me, but it was, sometimes the guys, they talk about weird things or something, and you're thinking, oh, clearly I'm an outsider. But like people have been saying, like as you progress in the field, or as you are progressing your courses or in the field, it matters more. Like it matters more what you're doing and what you're producing and what you're thinking about and talking about and contributing to the field than maybe how different you are from the other your classmates. And some of many of the physics majors that I was with are still my friends, and today, and it got in grad school, it wasn't much different. I was also one of the only females, but in addition to having sometimes discouragement, like Masha has related, I also was lucky enough to have a lot of encouragement, and I had some really wonderful mentors, and I had the pleasure of working with some amazing scientists, and both female and male, who were very encouraging of someone who just really loved the research and So I didn't know that I wanted to be a researcher. I had no idea what it was, and I didn't know what a real scientist did. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. But my mentors saw how much I loved playing in the lab, and they encouraged me to pursue a science. They encouraged me to pursue my field that I'm in now, and kind of showed me that this is an option that I didn't even know about.
Thank you. Oh, Gina, did you have your hand up earlier? No. Okay. And then I'm just looking at the time as well. We have another interesting question from students. What advice would you have for students who aren't interested in a four-year college degree? Gina?
So for folks who are interested in doing more field-based work, I work with a nonprofit that partners with federal agencies, currently the Forest Service, but I've partnered with other agencies such as the National Park Service. These federal agencies have lots of internship programs. They have one, the Forest Service has an internship program if you have served in the military, and a couple of other pathway programs that allow opportunity to work in public lands, in resources and research management. It's a little bit of a different direction than studying the way that I did. I got a 4-year degree in geology and then a master's degree in education and teaching. But sometimes taking a break to do some of those internships can give you perspective. It certainly gave me perspective about whether I want to work in this industry, in this field. And there are many internships available for high school age students as well. Some of the internships are offered through partnering nonprofit organizations, such as the one that I work for called the Mount St. Helens Institute, but often there also are many internship opportunities through the National Forest Service and the National Park Service.
Thank you. Anyone else like to talk on that topic? Kim?
I just like to add, I mean, although many of us pursued 4-year degrees as our, you know, like that's like a norm, that's a path, one path to working in STEM. But I think it's most important that you pursue the kind of work that you love. And sometimes, you know, there are many paths to get to where you like the kind of work that you love to do, and not everybody's path is the same. And so obviously, for example, we have many different paths here, but a 4-year degree can you know, help you get towards certain career goals, but there are many interesting opportunities. Like Gina mentioned, people working in the military, there's a lot of options, like a lot of technical and STEM, like engineering type training and professions associated with the, you know, I mean, most people in the military or the Coast Guard or things are trained in very technical and engineering type disciplines. And there's a lot of internships also at cities and companies that don't require 4-year degrees necessarily, or maybe at the beginning. And I think internships are a great way to explore different kinds of career paths. So probably most of us, that's how we, you know, by working in different, by trying out different fields is how we really find out the field that we love.
Sometimes you can be paid for these internships also, I believe. Yeah. And Ananya, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Well, one thing I just wanted to add was a lot of times during like during high school and even during college, a lot of people are uncertain about exactly what they want to do, and that's perfectly normal. So I think the best thing to do in that case is what you guys are doing, which is to attend these kind of panels and talk to people about exactly what they're doing. And you can always try new things. If you don't like something, if you try out a certain pathway and you realize, it's not really for me, you can always switch, because you have like time to switch, and no one's gonna say, oh wait, you say like you started this, but you don't want to do this anymore. That's perfectly normal. And it's actually a valuable experience, because if you find out, oh, this was one area of biology, for example, that I thought I liked, but then after I did it, I don't really like it anymore, that's fine, because that was a valuable experience, because you found out you didn't like that. So finding out that you don't like things is also a valuable experience as well, because then that gets you closer to doing what you actually like.
Thank you. And next question is, do you see an advantage of being a female in your field? Masa?
Well, that's a very good question. I guess if I don't look at it as advantage, I look at it as value. Advantage, maybe we don't have that many female engineers, it's good to have more, but I still look at it as a value. Being female to me is not as advantage or disadvantage, is a value. It's like diversity. We need female in engineering, in STEM, in science, because we don't have that diversity. Diversity brings value to each field. As a woman, especially in my field, the value women can bring is we all are, by nature, we are detail oriented. Women can handle multitasking easier in general than men. There are exceptions, but as in Mother Nature just gave us that ability to be more detail oriented, to just, these are example as I'm trying to say, and these are value as a woman you can bring to your team, to your industry. There are so many other values. I just wanted to give example. Same as I would like to mention other diversity. People in color, I believe there is value they can bring to their team, to the industry. For example, for me, culturally, we are so, we love socializing. We're so easy connecting with people. These things are bringing value. Just I would say we need to think about what value as a woman, as a person in color, you can bring to your industry, to your team, and then we can say maybe it's an advantage.
Thank you. Deborah?
Just quickly to follow up on that value notion, one of the things that I've been studying on and off for the last 10 to 15 years is how do you quantify or put a number on the value of innovation. And there are quite a few studies that say cross-disciplinary teams that have broad diversity, women, people of color, etc., outperform teams that are not diverse. And so bringing that diversity of perspective, of language, of culture, of color, of gender really brings value to the table when it comes to collaboration.
Nanya?
So in my experience, I actually love being a woman in STEM, and it's a very empowering feeling. So actually, when I was in middle school and early high school, there was equal involvement of women and men in STEM fields. And then I walked into my first computer science class in high school, and there was only one other girl in the class. And I was shocked, because I was like, I've never seen this before. And like I was like nowadays it's like that. I was like, oh, that's wild. And I quite frankly, I did not like the class at all, because all the guys had some computer science experience. I had zero computer science experience. But I made it through the class, and I was like, I don't really like this. And then in college, especially in the molecular engineering major itself, there are very, very few women, just because it's a new major, and also that's just how it is, like, that's just how it's turned out, especially for my class. But I really like that, in a way, that we were the starting involvement of women in the engineering, because we have our own group and we collaborate with each other. And also there's this idea, like, I feel confident because I'm like, oh, I'm unique because I'm a woman in STEM. And we have events for women in STEM. We have panels. We talk to the women professors in our department. So it's been a great experience because I made so many friends just because we are women in engineering, which is great. And it's really nice to see more women coming into the department, especially because I'm the first and currently only South Asian woman in the major. And I think in my class, there are only 2 women of color, including me. So it's really nice that I see more people coming in, and we're building something for them, that they can have this community. So it's been great being a woman in STEM, even though there's so few of us. I really like how we have the dynamic of being able to solve problems together, just because, I mean, those are engineering problems, but we're able to relate to each other because we're underrepresented in this. So we solve our engineering problems together.
And one of my last questions is, what single most important piece of advice would you give us as students? Ananya?
So I would say one thing that's really important, obviously there's like there's a lot of advice that you'll receive. One thing that has really helped me is that there will be times when you're going through your classes or your research or your career path, and you run into obstacles. And there will be times when you're like, oh, this is not for me. I can do something way easier. I should just quit. But every time I think that, and for some reason I'm like, okay, no, like, I'll just stick it through and I'll see what happens. It always works out. So there's always this idea of whenever you start something new, sometimes there's a steep learning curve, but you have to be okay with that. And you'll find that as you get along and you struggle more and more, your skin gets thicker. And then when you get to new obstacles, you're like, oh, I've had this challenge before. And although I'm struggling now, I know that before, whenever I had a challenge, I'm like this, I made it through. So stick it through and you will see the rewards. It's worked for me every time. So yeah, that's probably my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you. Gina?
One thing that's helped me a lot is finding a group of people who are not, I have friends, but I also have friends, or I call them mentors, who do what I do. Maybe these folks are older than me, and I became friends with them because I saw they were doing something that I thought was cool, and maybe I wanted to do it. Maybe these folks are younger than me and they're doing things more creatively than I am doing. But I've built for myself a network of mentors for the career goals that I have. And maybe some of those goals may not be, I want to be a geologist working in this state at this geologic survey, but I want to have mentors around me who are strong communicators, science communicators. Maybe they're strong in understanding natural history and natural systems. And so I've worked to create a network of these people, and I keep in touch with them differently, but also in the same types of ways that I keep in touch with my friends. So if I find an article, or maybe I write a reflective piece myself, I have people I can share with that have have career goals in common with me. And so I found it very, very helpful to build a network of mentors. And I keep in touch with these people. I write letters, I send cards and notes, and I receive gifts from them as well. One of my mentors, who's an incredible natural historian, once knit me, and I should have worn it today, but it is a scarf where every row of stitches represents a different amount of time, and the entire scarf represents the age of the earth. And so the geologic time scale is knit into the scarf with different geologic eras in different colors. And she even put little charms on. When there were dinosaurs, there's a dinosaur charm, and when there were the first plants, there's a little plant charm. So she created this incredible piece that's in itself a piece for science communication, a piece for geology education, and just a piece for fun. And she is one of my mentors. So building a network of professional mentors for yourself, even when you're in high school, is not, you can never be too forward and saying, hey, I really like what you're doing and I want to know more. Do you have an email list? Can I get on your list? Do you mind if I add you to a list of my contacts?
Thank you.
She also, if I can add one thing, she knitted a scarf for Neil deGrasse Tyson that was the scale of the universe and mailed it to him as well. So.
Masa, did you want to add something?
Just want to add, this is all right to be scared or confused what you want to do in high school. It's normal, as other panelists mentioned here. But I want to say we are living in a country that there are so much support, so much help. Just go for it. Use what is available. There are so much mentorship, program, internship. Just take that, and then that definitely helps you to define what you want to do, or you still may not be 100% certain. That's all right. I think most of us were not certain. We were just important to educate yourself as much as you can, and then focus and go for it. Don't let that uncertainty push you back.
Thank you. Any last comments anybody'd like to make? Deborah?
I just wanted to follow up with Gina said, and networking is key. I mean, whether it's networking early in your career, later in your career, peer mentoring, peer coaching, networking. So many times I've had opportunities come to me, or I've given opportunities to others because of my network. It's never too early to start building that and contributing to it. Don't just take from the network, but give to the people in your network as well.
Thank you. We are actually out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to thank all of you as Women in STEM panelists today for joining us for our first virtual career panel. And we hope students have learned something about a job they didn't know much before, and that they are inspired by you. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. And Vicki?
Thanks, Sue, and once again to all the panelists, thank you so much. This has been really inspirational to listen to as a teacher and as what Sue and I like to think of ourselves as growing the next generation of women in STEM up through the kindergarten through 12th grade system. So this has been a wonderful opportunity, a great way to kick off this series of panels. Thank you again very much. So next week, our panel is going to focus on professionals from the world of business and finance. If you have questions for those professionals, be sure to get in touch with your teachers so you can submit them ahead of time. Teachers, if you'd like to learn more about how to support this program, please get in touch with us at Career Connect Southwest. And from our whole team, thank you for joining us today. Check back next week for our next video career panel. And stay home, stay safe, and have a great day. Thanks.